Ever feel like you're watching a slow motion movie where you know a huge showdown is coming, but you just can't look away? That's exactly what's happening inside the most famous palace in the world right now. For the past few weeks, Camilla Parker Bowles has been dealing with a ton of stress. From what people close to the royals are saying, things are about to get much, much harder for her. There's a secret story unfolding at Buckingham Palace that feels like it's been waiting to happen for 30 whole years. This isn't just about one little argument. It's about two people you might not expect to be on the same team joining forces, Princess Anne and Prince William. And the person they have in their sights is the woman who is always right next to King Charles at every public event. You know, the one who was known as the other woman for years before she became queen consort. People who know what's going on inside the palace are whispering that her powerful position might not be as safe as she wants everyone to think. To really understand this, we have to go back to a specific moment that made everyone inside the palace stop and take notice. About 3 weeks before this whole story started to leak out, a very important royal aide made a phone call. Now, this wasn't a call to a newspaper reporter, it wasn't to a government official, and it wasn't to any of the usual people you'd contact for royal public relations. This was a call to a lawyer, and it was made on behalf of Princess Anne. The call was about Camilla. It lasted less than 10 minutes. It was short and to the point. According to sources, it was the kind of conversation you have when you've already made up your mind and you just need to make sure the path you're about to take is clear. That call, sources say, was just the first small move in a much, much bigger plan. Now, think about Princess Anne for a second. She has been a member of this family for over 70 years. She was there, watching everything happen in real time. She saw all of it: the affairs, the separation, the shocking panorama interview, the divorce, and the terrible tragedy of Diana's death. She kept her feelings about it all locked up tight, both professionally and privately, the same way she handles everything in her life. So the question everyone is asking is, why now? Why is this all happening in 2026? Why, after keeping her feelings hidden for 3 decades, is Anne suddenly making these kinds of moves? According to the insiders, the answer has two parts, and you need to understand both of them to get what's really going on. The first part is all about Prince William. His place in the royal institution has completely changed over the last year and a half. He's not just waiting around to be king anymore. He is now making real, huge financial decisions that have serious consequences. The best place to see this is with the Duchy of Cornwall. This is a massive estate worth a staggering £1.2 billion. It's made up of land, property, and investments. And now, it's all under William's direct control. He doesn't need to ask for permission or get approval from Charles or anyone else. The very first big public sign of how William planned to use this power came when he removed Annabel Elliot from the duchy's payroll. That's Camilla's younger sister, who is an interior designer. She had worked on duchy properties under Charles for almost 20 years, earning between £19,000 and £82,000 a year, depending on the project. The moment William took over the duchy after Queen Elizabeth died, Annabel's name simply vanished from the financial records. There was no public argument, no official statement, she was just gone, and she wasn't replaced with someone neutral. William brought in his own people, close friends from his personal circle, even godparents of his children. These were people loyal only to him. Royal experts noticed this change immediately and said it was causing big waves inside the palace. That one decision sent a clear message that everyone understood. Anne watched all of this happen, and sources say she completely approved. This is where the two parts of the story connect. Sources suggest that William's move opened up a conversation between Anne and him that had been waiting for years to happen. Both of them, for different but deeply personal reasons, had reached the same point at the same time. They were done waiting. The second part of the answer goes back to Diana. August 31st, 2027 will mark 30 years since Diana died in that terrible car crash in Paris. 30 years since William, at just 15 years old, had to walk behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London in front of the whole world. He is now 43, a husband, and a father of three. And in nearly 30 years of public life, he has never once made a direct statement connecting how he feels about Camilla to what his mother went through. But he never really had to. His actions have been speaking for him all along. Sources say that Anne reached a point in the past few months where she decided she was done. She was done letting her loyalty to the institution override her own private feelings. She was done watching Camilla occupy spaces, both literal rooms and symbolic roles, that Anne believes should belong to Diana's memory instead of belonging to the woman who caused Diana so much pain. Anne, who saw Diana's suffering up close back then and carries her own version of that grief, decided it was finally time to do something about it. And when Anne decided to act, she had access to something that is now making certain people inside Buckingham Palace genuinely nervous. There's a room at Windsor Castle called the Royal Archives. No tourists are allowed in, no documentary crews, and no public access. What it holds is the unfiltered, unedited, completely private history of the British royal family. We're talking about letters, diaries, and internal memos. It's the written record of what was really happening inside the institution during the most chaotic decades of the 20th century. This includes the years when Charles and Diana's marriage was visibly and horrifically falling apart. Princess Anne has access to these materials at a level that almost no one outside the immediate family has, and sources suggest she has been spending time reviewing them. It's worth asking yourself, what exactly is in those archives from the 1980s and 90s that certain people really don't want coming to light right now? We already know the big picture. The separation in 1992, the leaked Camillagate tapes in 1993, Charles's television confession in 1994, Diana's panorama interview in 1995, the divorce in 1996, and Diana's death in 1997. All of that has been talked about, written about, and debated for 30 years. But what sources say is in those archives is something much more specific. It's the private, personal record of who knew exactly what and when they knew it. It shows who helped make things happen and how. It reveals the inside story of how the institution actually worked during that time. It's the part of the story that the public has never fully seen. It includes details about how Diana's very real concerns were received and handled by the palace. It's about how the institution managed a situation where one of its own members was clearly suffering in a very public way. According to people who know about Anne's review of the archives, the materials tell a story of institutional failure that goes much further than anything we've ever seen. And Anne believes that this story deserves to be part of the complete and accurate historical record. It shouldn't be hidden or softened just to protect the feelings of the people who would rather it all stay secret. Camilla is definitely one of those people. A complete and honest account of Charles and Diana's marriage is a very uncomfortable document for the current queen consort, and it always has been. The difference now is that the person asking questions about whether that record should be kept under lock and key is someone with the access, the power, and the personal drive to actually do something about it. Sources say Anne's position is straightforward. She believes the historical record of that period should be complete and unredacted. She doesn't think the woman now sitting beside the king at every state occasion has any right to shape how the most painful chapter of Diana's life gets remembered. That's where Anne keeps landing. And that conclusion has huge implications for Camilla, implications that go way beyond any argument over property or payroll. Now let's talk about what William is doing at the same time, because this is where the story gets even more complex. The Duchy of Cornwall generated approximately £30 million in a single year recently. That comes from tenant farms, holiday cottages, the Isles of Scilly, land rights in Dartmoor, and other commercial investments that have been built up over nearly 700 years. Every single pound of it is controlled solely by William. Sources say he has been using that control with careful precision, and people in Camilla's circle are only now starting to understand just how much. The removal of Annabel Elliot was just the opening move, and it was already a big deal. But sources say what happened next went even further. Access to crown events, invitations to important royal occasions, and invitations that used to be sent to members of Camilla's wider family and friends have been quietly withdrawn. Appearances where Parker Bowles' family members expected to be present have been restructured with no explanation given. It's the same slow, deliberate, and entirely deniable process that we saw with Annabel Elliot, but now it's being applied more broadly across every connection between Camilla's family and the institution that William controls. None of these things by themselves would make a huge headline, but when you step back and look at the whole picture, it all adds up to something unmistakable. And then there's the Diana side of what William is doing with his money. Sources say this is entirely intentional. William has been quietly directing some of the duchy's money toward the causes his mother originally championed. We're talking about mental health, homelessness, and HIV awareness. These are the causes Diana made her own during her lifetime. The same ones the royal establishment initially tried to stop her from supporting because they were considered too controversial for a senior royal to get involved with. Diana did it anyway, and she paid a price for it. Now her son controls $1.2 billion in assets and $30 million in yearly income. And sources say he is using a part of that money for exactly the things his mother cared about, the very things the institution was trying to stop her from doing. Sources say Anne has privately expressed something that, in anyone less disciplined, you would just call satisfaction. What Anne is doing with the archives, and what William is doing with the duchy represent what insiders call a two-front operation. It's about history and money, the past and the future. Both are being reshaped at the same time by the two people in this family who have the most personal reasons to do it. And Camilla is caught right in the middle. Her official, ceremonial position is being affected too. And this part of the story is really important because it's subtle. It's easy to miss unless you're paying close attention. When Camilla walked into Westminster Abbey for the coronation on May 6th, 2023, she was wearing the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara. That was Queen Elizabeth's personal favorite, the one that appeared on British money for decades. Wearing it was a powerful statement. It was a carefully chosen signal that Camilla had truly arrived, that her position was fully legitimate, and that her long journey to acceptance was complete. For her supporters, it was a huge, triumphant moment. But for others inside the palace, sources suggest it was more like a clock starting. Because that tiara will one day sit on Catherine's head when she becomes queen consort. And when that happens, the symbolic transfer will be so total and so clear that everything Camilla's coronation moment represented will basically be wiped away. Sources say Anne and William both understand this perfectly, and they're not just waiting around for that day to come. In royal life, symbols are not just decoration, they are power. The specific objects, ceremonies, and patronages that go along with the crown communicate something important to both the institution and the public. They tell everyone who really matters, who truly belongs, and whose legacy will last. Camilla has spent 2 decades carefully collecting these symbols. Royal patronages, charitable associations, and ceremonial roles that give her position real meaning and legitimacy beyond just being Charles's wife. Sources suggest that this collection of symbols is now being interrupted. When Queen Elizabeth died, she held hundreds of royal patronages. The job of giving these patronages out to the working royals has been going on since 2022. Sources say Anne has been involved in some of these decisions in ways that have quietly shaped the outcome. Certain high-profile patronages that were being lined up for Camilla have been redirected. There wasn't any big public announcement about it, just a quiet change that sources say reflects new priorities, not just simple logistics. In 2025, Charles gave William and Catherine the authority to issue royal warrants. This means they can publicly endorse brands and institutions on behalf of the crown. It's a privilege that monarchs have historically guarded very carefully. Giving it to William and Kate was a public signal about where the crown's symbolic weight is being moved. It's being deliberately shifted toward the next generation, toward William and Catherine, and away from the current reign and everything associated with it, including Camilla. Sources also say that decisions are currently being made about how the reign of King Charles III is being documented. This includes official photos, museum displays, and documentary projects. All of this is reflecting William and Anne's priorities about how this period of history should be remembered. It's about who gets centered in the story, who becomes a side note, and whose presence in the official record is made prominent or quietly minimized. Royal history is shaped by what gets saved and how it gets saved. The official record of a reign becomes the historical record, and the historical record becomes the legacy. Camilla's legacy, sources say, is being shaped right now by people with very specific ideas about what it should and shouldn't contain. People describe her private reaction to the enormous weight of all these moves as someone watching their own carefully built image being taken apart. It's not happening in one big dramatic moment, but in 100 small, quiet ones. Each one is easy to deny on its own, but together they are devastating. Then there's her personal life, which tells a story of its own. Camilla sold Ray Mill House. There was no press release, no fancy magazine feature, and no carefully managed announcement. It was just a property that appeared on the market and then disappeared from her life. This was the Wiltshire getaway she owned since before she married Charles. It was the place she publicly called her personal escape. She once called the garden there the best therapy in the world. Now it's gone. And sources say that sale tells you more about where Camilla's head is right now than anything she has said in public for months. People don't sell their personal sanctuaries casually. They don't give up the one place that is all theirs, the place that predates everything that came after, unless something has fundamentally shifted in how they see their own future. Right now, Camilla has access to multiple royal residences: Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, Balmoral. She has the full backing of a reigning queen consort. But that picture changes completely when Charles dies. Sandringham passes to William, Balmoral passes to William, and Buckingham Palace becomes William and Catherine's main official home. The properties Camilla now uses freely will become properties she can only visit if William invites her. Sources say her likely inheritance will be Clarence House, worth about $72 million, and Highgrove, worth around $39 million. Those are significant assets for sure, but they are nothing compared to the position she currently holds. She would go from being queen consort with the full power of the monarchy behind her to a private citizen with a title, living in two houses, and at the mercy of a man who grew up watching what she did to his mother. Sources say Camilla understands this math very clearly. The family side of things makes it all worse. Annabel Elliot is gone from the Duchy payroll. Tom Parker Bowles' access to royal spaces is apparently over after the Balmoral situation. The Parker Bowles family's broader closeness to the crown is quietly shrinking. Camilla spent 20 years building a network of access and connections for her children and siblings inside the institution she married into. Sources say William is taking it apart, piece by piece, with a patience and thoroughness that shows this is a real, long-term plan, not just a temporary burst of anger. And then there's the Sarah Ferguson situation, which has become a big problem that Camilla just can't fix. Ferguson's name came up in the Epstein files released by the U.S. Justice Department. There's no evidence she did anything illegal, but the connection is real and it's documented. In the middle of the ongoing drama around Prince Andrew, sources say William has made his position very clear to Camilla. He wants her to distance herself from Ferguson, publicly and permanently, or face the consequences of keeping that friendship. Camilla hasn't fully done what he asked. She thinks ending a friendship that goes back to before she was a royal is both personally impossible and deeply unfair. William sees her loyalty to Ferguson as proof that she has bad judgment, which just confirms his concerns about whether she can represent the institution in the future. That disagreement is still going on, and sources say it's costing Camilla power and influence inside the palace more and more each week. Now, here's where the story gets really complicated. Right in the middle of all this is King Charles. His position in this situation is honestly one of the saddest parts to think about. He made a phone call to Anne earlier this year that sources describe as one of the hardest conversations between the two siblings in decades. It wasn't angry or accusatory, it was quiet and painful. It was the call of a man who understands exactly what his sister is doing and exactly why she's doing it, and he finds himself completely unable to argue against it with any real belief. The call lasted 40 minutes and ended with nothing resolved. That one small detail tells you a lot about where Charles actually stands. He is 76 years old. He was diagnosed with cancer in February of 2024. The specific type hasn't been made public, but he has been getting treatment for over a year. He's kept up his public duties with real discipline. But discipline isn't the same as strength, and keeping up appearances isn't the same as having the energy to fight on multiple fronts at the same time. Sources say his energy for managing complicated family drama has dropped off a lot over the last year and a half. Protecting Camilla from what William and Anne are doing would require exactly the kind of long, repeated, conflict filled involvement that he is least able to handle right now. Protecting Camilla would mean telling William to give back access and privileges to people William deliberately removed. William wouldn't do it, and Charles knows that. It would mean telling Anne to stop whatever she's doing with the archives. Anne wouldn't do it either, and Charles knows that too. It would mean putting himself publicly against both his heir and his sister at the same time, all to defend the woman that millions of people still blame for his first wife's suffering. The political and personal cost of that position is just too high, and sources say Charles is fully aware of that. But here's the part of Charles's position that sources say is the most painful of all. He knows why William and Anne feel the way they do. Because he was there, and he was the cause of it. He's the man who had the affair that Diana described as causing her deep personal pain. He's the reason that grief exists. How can you argue against your son's grief over his mother when you're the reason that grief exists in the first place? How can you tell your sister that protecting your wife's position is more important than honoring the memory of your sister-in-law, who suffered so much because of your own choices? Sources say Charles can't make either of those arguments with any real belief, because he doesn't fully believe them himself. There's a comment Charles reportedly made to a senior aide during this time that sources describe as quietly revealing. He didn't express anger at William, and he didn't express frustration with Anne. He is said to have expressed understanding. The understanding of a man who knows that the people moving against his wife are doing so for reasons he himself created, and he has no answer for that. So, what does all of this actually mean? There's one version of this story that looks like simple revenge. William and Anne are systematically destroying everything Camilla built as payback for what she did to Diana. But there's another version that looks like something more thoughtful and more lasting than revenge. Sources say the second version is closer to the truth. Simple revenge would be Camilla publicly humiliated and stripped of everything in one big, dramatic moment. That's not what sources say William and Anne are building. What they're doing is more patient, more permanent, and ultimately more meaningful. Think about what Diana actually stood for. Not the fairy tale image, but the real substance of what she did. She touched AIDS patients when the establishment was still treating the disease as something shameful. She walked through active minefields in Angola to make a political point about weapons killing civilians. She sat with homeless people, looked them in the eye, and treated them as fully human in a way that senior royals just weren't supposed to do. She did all of this against the active resistance of an institution that found her emotional directness threatening and her popularity destabilizing. She was right about all of it. The institution was wrong. And William knows this, not as a historical fact, but as his lived, personal experience. He watched his mother be right while the institution punished her for it. Now, he runs that institution. Sources say William's modernization plan is not just good management. It is Diana, expressed through the institution. The emotional intelligence she was told was inappropriate, the public accountability she was told was dangerous, and the genuine human connection she was told was beneath the dignity of a royal. All of it is being built into the monarchy that William is creating. Anne's contribution runs right alongside that. She has decades of quiet, real, impactful work that stands as a living argument against fake, performative royalty. It's the exact argument Diana made and paid everything to make. And here's what Camilla is slowly and painfully starting to understand. She won the battle. She got Charles, the title, the coronation, the tiara, and the seat beside the king. But the war was never really about Charles. It was about Diana and what Diana represented, and whether the institution Diana tried to change would eventually become something worthy of the price she paid. William and Anne are building that institution right now, not for revenge, but for Diana. And Camilla has no strategy to counter that. You can't argue against a legacy. You can't negotiate with grief. You can't outsmart a son who watched his mother die and spent 28 years deciding, quietly and deliberately, what to do about it. Diana never got to see what this monarchy could become. She got a Paris tunnel, two boys without a mother, and a family that barely lowered its flag. But sources say something is happening inside that palace right now that she never lived to see. Her son and her sister-in-law are moving together, quietly and permanently, reshaping everything Camilla built into something Diana would have recognized as hers. It's not revenge. It's something better than revenge. It's legacy. And that, more than any argument about property, payroll, or symbolic tiaras, is what sources describe as Camilla's darkest reality in decades.